Anita, how's your mental health?
Questionable at all times. You know this.
Yeah, how's the mental health of your children?
Also a little bit tricky. Can I tell you my experience in trying to find therapists for myself and my kids, Mel?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is how it goes. You ask around your friends and your family for a referral for somebody who's nearby. You finally find somebody who sounds like they might work for your family. You give them a call and you find out that A, they're not accepting new patients, or B, they have a huge wait list. So you start over again and you ask people if they know anybody who would be a good therapist and a good fit. Finally, you find one, you go and you meet with them, and you figure out that you don't actually like them that much. But it's been so much work to find somebody who you can go to in your area that you're kind of stuck with them. Well, do you have any ideas for how to get around this?
I do because guess what? I've actually had some therapists that I have found on my own, which involves what you're saying. Sometimes I remember one time I was like 3 hours in the bathtub on my phone looking
Yeah.
through websites. I was such a prune at the end. But I have also had the experience with working with BetterHelp. And it was like, I don't want to say too good to be true, but because it is true, but it's like amazing because I was matched with my therapist within 24 hours.
And you didn't have to go through all of that other ridiculous process of trying to find somebody. And here's the cool thing too, is if that person didn't work out for you, you can just switch and say, and it's not like you're committing to another years long search for somebody who you're going to jive with.
It's true. And I lucked out, or maybe just BetterHelp is really good at matching people together because I never had to change my therapist. I loved her. Perfect fit for me. And I know that some of our friends have used BetterHelp and they've had to change therapists, and boom, same day, you can change.
Easy peasy.
You can ghost your therapist. Get a new one.
I love this idea. BetterHelp is one of our sponsors. If you use our promo code trybetterhelp.com/WWDN, you get 10% off your first month, and we totally recommend it.
Yes, get some therapy. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN.
Oh, what's going on? What's new in your life? How's it going? How you been? What you up to? Hi, Anita. How are you doing? What's going on in your life? Mel, your voice. What's going on? You sound really weird. Well, I'm having some issues finding my cable to hook my microphone to my computer. And so you're just pretending to be my voice because we're running against a time crunch and I can't find my cable. Oh, yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder if people are gonna buy it. What do you think? No, because you're doing a terrible impersonation of my voice. This is not what I sound like at all. Oh, I know, but it was short notice, so I couldn't do a lot of preparation on the voice, so this is what you're getting. What's going on? What's been happening in the last week? I know you've had some Wi-Fi issues. Yeah, totally. My Wi-Fi hasn't been working, but I stole my neighbor's password, and so I've been stealing their Wi-Fi, and that's been working pretty good. Oh, that's awesome. Also, I heard that you redid your studio. You like painted it. It looks rad. Totally. It's like green and then there's like a jungle motif. It's pretty amazing. What about you, Anita? What's been going on with you? Well, Mel, it's been an eventful week. I had a little surgery at the beginning of last week, and so my kids have been gone. I farmed them out to some friends, and I just spent a week being really drugged up and watching every episode of Say Yes to the Dress. So that's been fun. I can't remember anything that happened, but I don't think that's such a bad thing. Yeah, I brought you a planter that looks like an elephant, a little cute pot with some succulents in it for you to recover. I know, that was so nice of you. Thanks, Mel. You're truly my soulmate. Do you want to tell them about the awesome gift that we got sent in the mail? Oh, totally. Our friend Ileana from New York sent us two amazing paintings that her kids did. We'll post a video of the unboxing of the gift. Thanks, Ileana. Yeah, I was not expecting what was in there, and it is so awesome. So thank you, Ileana. And in a fun turn of events, we actually have had people reviewing from different countries. So I guess the contest is back on. But I have bad news. Oh no! What's your bad news? My daughter had to give her clarinet back to the people we were borrowing it from. So we're trying to acquire a new clarinet because we need one for this school year too. But hopefully I can get one in time and learn. Right now, I believe it's Canada who's in first place. Is that right, Mel? I'm not entirely sure, but I think so. We'll check, but I think it is Canada. Well, there you go. So the other crazy thing that happened, Mel, was that our school district announced that they were going to change the plan. We were going to go back to quote unquote normal school with masks and social distancing and all that. But now we're going to go to a 2-day a week in school, 3-day a week homeschool situation so they can spread out the people in the classrooms more. And I'm just like, whatever, like I don't even expect it to stay the same. I think it's going to change. Also, so I'm just here for the ride at this point in time. I just don't know what my life looks like anymore. It's just been one crazy thing after the other. Well, I think we should get to our guest today because this is very painful for everybody involved, including myself. I'm Anita. I'm Mel! And we're just one young widow pretending to be two young widows trying to figure out, widow, what do you do now? 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 Listen, grieving is hard. Being widowed is hard. And actually, just being a human is hard. Everybody has stuff. BetterHelp.com is making it easier than ever to get the help that you need. BetterHelp gives you secure access to licensed counselors to help you cope with just being on this planet. Just fill out a quick questionnaire, and BetterHelp will match you with a therapist that suits your needs. Our listeners get 10% off their first month by using the link betterhelp.com/WWDN. That's BetterHelp, as in help me. .com/WWDN. Go get yourself some therapy.
Warning, the following interview contains topics that may be sensitive for some listeners.
Right after Jason died, one of the first podcasts I came across that I found really helpful was called Widowland Life. And it's a podcast where the hosts kind of are doing what we started doing now, is interviewing and finding out people's stories about how they lost their spouse. And for me, it just really helped to normalize a lot of the things that I was feeling. I really felt crazy. I really felt like a sociopath. We've talked about that. So listening to other people's stories, I really felt was helpful. And so today we've turned the tables and we have one of the hosts of Widowland Life, another podcast that focuses on loss. And her name is Laurel Steele. So welcome, Laurel. I'm so excited to turn the interviewer into the interviewee.
This is it is like tables being turned, because I remember the day you sent me an email about listening to our podcast, and we hadn't released very many episodes, and I was like, this is so cool, because we were starting to get some feedback coming in, and we corresponded a little bit. And you're hysterical. You're funny in person, but your writing to me just makes me laugh. It's awesome. So anyway, you asked to be on the podcast, and I was like, that'd be awesome. And then life got weird, and anyway, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me, and let's do this.
We're excited to hear a little bit about your story, first of all, because on your podcast, you talked to a bunch of widows and widowers, but you never really went into your story. So I want to know your tale.
This is true, and I always say that I'm always willing to tell my story, but I think when you have a grief story that's maybe more on the ugly side, you tend to narrow it down to a few bullet points, because if someone dies of, let's say, cancer, everyone has a real soft spot and a warm spot for that. But my husband died from drug addiction, and you bring that up, and people just don't know what to say. Like, my husband was a drug addict. Oh, and this kind of like, it's just a conversation killer. Not that death isn't anyway, but, like,
Yes.
it's one of those where it's like a weird spot. It's like disease / someone's fault / no one wants to really talk about it. So
Yeah.
anyway, so depending on my audience, I will decide how much I'm going to say. So if it's someone that I just don't want to talk to at all, I'll just say, oh, he had an adverse reaction to medication, like death.
That's a tricky way of saying it.
So one thing I like to do in my podcast is kind of get a sense for who we're talking about, because I'm telling a story and he can't chime in and be funny. And he was such a great and funny guy. And when someone dies of something like drug addiction, it makes it seem like there's this looming negative, and it kind of erases all of the positives. So I'll just jump back really quick. So I met him by cleaning his teeth. So I'm a dental hygienist, which always gets a laugh. And he would like to say, yeah, she just held the drill until I agreed to go out with her. And I would be like, honey, dental hygienists don't use drills. And the true story is that we both bought cars the same week. He came in, cleaned his teeth. Thankfully, he had good teeth.
I was going to ask what his plaque level was. Was it like, ew, gross, or it was okay?
It had been 2 years. He had been on a mission for our church. And so it was like, okay, his teeth are good enough. I will go out with you,
Okay.
So anyway,
Yes.
He got my number and called me, and we just went out every day after that. You know how those quick romances go. So we got married like 6 months later. And then he went to 7 years of school right after that. He became a physician assistant. We lived in St. Louis for a while, originally from Idaho, both of us. And we have 4 kids, girl, boy. So he was super, super smart guy and super personable, and he loved his patients very much. And he just had that tendency to be obsessive about things. And at some point, he started taking a medication called Ambien, which has been touted to be non-addictive. And around the same time, he took some hydrocodone cough syrup. Anyway, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but they ended up both being favorites. And we went through about 15 years of up and down and drug addictions. And because of his profession, he was able to write prescriptions. And
he could write them for himself?
Well, not technically, but he could, let's say, write them for someone else. So this year would be the 30th anniversary of when we got married. So I've been a widow for 7 years. We got married in 1990 in our early 20s, and he died when he was 44. I was 46, and that was 7 years ago. So going back in time, I can't really remember that we talked about anxiety. Like, I would never have used that as a label for him up until, let's say, 15 years ago. Like, so much of mental health has evolved, and we have words for things now that I don't think we did then. So I would have said that he came from a very volatile family and wasn't the best at controlling his emotions. So he was like a super life of the party guy, and he could also be super mean. He could be the nicest person in the world and the meanest person in the world, and that was without drugs. So you take that and you start adding an alter your brain substance, and then you have like a disaster, a tsunami, So maybe 7 years into our marriage, I started to notice there was a problem. And he would go with a particular friend, and effectively they would start acting like they were drunk, even though I knew they weren't drinking. So they would just be kind of boisterous and loud, and then he came home from work one day and was like, "Oh my gosh, someone stole some hydrocodone cough syrup at work," and he kind of went on and on about it, and like someone else had done it, and I found out later that it was him. But his way of kind of covering things up was to talk about stuff. So
Feigned outrage. Can you believe somebody else would do that?
Yeah. And they're going to get fired if they get caught, and so on and so forth. When you're raised in a very conservative religion and you're not raised around any substances, like no one in my family even drank coffee or tea or anything. So there's nothing about my past that prepared me to even understand what addiction was, to be honest. And I walked into everything very naively. And I'm also a very trusting person. And so I should have caught on to things quicker. All the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, right? And so, anyway, we had 4 kids during this time. And they're each 3 years apart. We have girl, boy. And right after the last one was born, with less than a year after, he got fired from his job. And I didn't understand really what was happening because he denied everything. He ended up eventually telling me that it was him that had stolen that cough medicine from work, but it was always a real downplay on everything. Like, it really wasn't his fault. Nothing was his fault. I don't know if you guys have any experience with addiction, but people learn to lie and manipulate, but most importantly, to compartmentalize. So in his mind, there was this one area of his life that he lied to me about. But the truth was, you can never do that because it overlaps into every area of your life. I think a lot of it boiled down to is he did have some things, like he had a lot of insomnia. And so for him, the Ambien was something that he needed so that he could sleep. But it became an addictive thing. And then because he felt like he needed it, it could be justified. So his way of coping was to justify the choices he was making. And anyway, eventually he got caught. And he had to do some outpatient treatment. He lost his job. He lost the ability to use his medical license, which is a big problem if you're providing for your family. Anyway, he went through outpatient treatment. He went through a lot of meetings, and eventually was able to practice again. I felt like got his life cleaned up, and he did really great for about a year. Problem with a lot of meetings and a lot of therapies is what happens is you're spending time with a lot of other addicts who know a lot more than you do, and taught him ways to play the system better. And then eventually he got another really awesome job and started having troubles, took a different job, had even more troubles, and got fired again. So I'm saying this story pretty quickly, but this is over the course of like 15 years. So
what kind of PA was he? What kind of doctor did he work for?
So he started out in a general practice clinic, and then he spent a number of years working emergency room. And then the last couple of years he did endocrinology. So the thing about, and I would brag on him in some ways, is he was amazing at what he did. Like, he really was. He was the kind of guy that
only geniuses can work in endocrinology. So
well, and our daughter has type 1 diabetes, so that was a good place to be too. But he was really good at what he did, and he really cared about his patients. So there was just, again, it's so hard to talk about such negatives about someone who, as many problems as they have, you love them deeply. You see the good things about them, which I think is what kind of makes you have blinders for some of the other things going on. Because retrospectively, when you look back, you're like, oh, wow, shouldn't have done that. Maybe should have left before. Maybe should have done a world of things different.
But it's never black and white,
No.
right? Because if it was black or white, you would have been like, I know what to do, but it's gray. It's always gray.
And much like us, we react different if we take a substance or if we're under a huge amount of stress, or, you know, we all have those times where we're like, oh man, that's not even me. Why did I do that? You know, like, but I go back to what I said before, where addiction is a disease and also a choice. So not a choice to be addicted, but every time you take medicine, it's a choice. But the addiction process is a disease. But it's a disease that you end up blaming on the person who's doing the addictive behavior. So he ended up losing another job, and we had to go through bankruptcy. I tell my friends, without going into graphic detail, that if you were ever to see a movie with someone who is an addict and any negative thing you can think of with violence or loss of income or trauma, that would be my life. And it was a lot. And it was a lot of years.
So you were living the dream, is what you're saying.
Or a Lifetime movie. You were living a Lifetime movie.
Yes, I was living a Lifetime
So,
movie.
Laurel, I mean, it's an abuse cycle also.
It is.
And so
it absolutely is.
That's a lot for you to come out of and have realizations. How were you coping through those times?
So as time went on, because I said this is years, as time went on, he became less and less capable of providing for our family, for one thing, of being able to be someone I could trust for another. So if you catch someone who's an addict, then you've caught them the only one time they ever did anything right, which is a huge lie, but they will convince you that that's the truth. And there's something about having a spouse that makes you want to believe what they say, right? A spouse relationship is one based on trust. And so you're usually starting in a place of trust. But as years go by, you know that you can no longer trust that. But by the time we got to that point, the drugs he had taken had damaged his nerves, especially the nerves in his neck. So he had a tick in his neck. I don't know if you see anyone with like Parkinson's or someone who they're just constant movement. And at that point, I became like a caregiver to him the last couple of years. So then I not only had to provide for my family now, I had to take care of him with his health. Like, it was literally get up every day and try to make it through. And at the very end, it was also, I had to keep my kids safe. So because he would be altered, he would get in the car and drive. They were forbidden to drive with him. He, at that point, had threatened me. What ended up happening was he lost his last job, and he was going to go to rehab. And I said, okay, honey, you have to tell me everything. Like we can't get a lot lower than this. Like, you're going to 90-day rehab. We're going to lose everything. Like, we had to do bankruptcy. You're probably not going to be able to work your job again. Like, how low can you go, right? I was like, just tell me everything. You can go to rehab. We can kind of start a clean slate when you come back. And I mean, like, I was dedicated to the marriage. I loved him. Well, he had told me everything, and he went to rehab. And then I found out a whole bunch of other things that he hadn't told me. And so I think that was my bottom point, rock bottom, where I knew that I was never going to be able to trust him again. Now, how we went forward after that, I wasn't sure, but I knew I would not be able to have a relationship of trust. And from that point on in my life, every relationship to me is a relationship of trust. A friendship, even a business relationship. Like, I have some inherent trust, with Anita and our little bit of interaction, or I wouldn't even, talk to you on a podcast.
Aww.
You know what I'm saying, though? Like, every single thing is about trust to me. Every single thing. So anyway, he came home from rehab, developed this medical condition, and then I was really in a conundrum because the only thing that stopped his tremors, his medical problem, was actually the things he was addicted to. So the equivalent of that would be, let's say someone's an alcoholic, but their doctor requires them to have alcohol. And it's just a cycle. Like there was no, I could not see a way out. Anyway, things escalated and the kids became more and more unsafe and I became more and more unsafe. And on Thanksgiving one day, he took my car when he was not supposed to and ended up rolling it. And he was okay. He was on a lot of medication. And I left with the kids. And a couple months after that, I moved with the kids to Utah. I tried to keep things as safe as I could for everybody, and I tried to keep him as happy as I could by talking to him about maybe he could move down with us or leaving things in a positive way. But I had to come down to provide for my kids and for my daughter with type 1 diabetes to have insurance. So this is a couple years before Obamacare. And it's a different world of insurance when you had a pre-existing condition, which, I mean, 10 years ago is not that long ago.
We could get into that for a long time, but we probably shouldn't.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a very, very stressful time. And I had to take the kids away from their friends. They knew there were problems. Moved my son during right before his senior year of high school. And my kids are amazing. They're troopers. But anyway, 3 weeks later, I got a phone call that he hadn't shown up to something he was supposed to do in the evening, and like my heart just sank. He was teaching a little night class, and it was like the one thing in his life he was kind of holding on to as giving him value. He was, a lot of times I think the story is told from like my side, like how it is to live with an addict, but how does it feel to be that person? To be that person who you can't function without medicine. You don't feel like you can function. You've had everything stripped away from you. I just, to this day, I have a lot of compassion for both sides of that story. But he hadn't shown up to teach a night class, and I just had that feeling you get in the pit of your stomach where you know something's wrong, and sent my brother-in-law over to our house in Idaho. The dog was inside. He could hear the dog. Carrie's car was my husband's car was in the garage. He could see that, but he couldn't get anyone to answer the door. And he was scared and I was scared. And I spent about the next 2 hours just waiting to get word. So my brother-in-law called the police. They came over, and it took a really long time for them to get any information to me, but they found him in our bedroom next to the side of the bed, and he had just taken too much medicine. My story, I think the whole thing is really complicated grief. And so it's like a heavy topic, and we're not laughing near enough as I tell this story. But it is hard because you love someone and there was all the amazing things in our lives. And then there was this whole other side that was the opposite of amazing. And when you lose someone under those circumstances, you can never reconcile that with them. My kids can't reconcile that with their dad. We can talk about the good times, and there were a lot, and their dad was amazing in so many ways. And we really try to emphasize that and the characteristics they have that were so amazing the way he was. But at the end of the day, there's this whole other difficult side that can never change and can never be reconciled. So, okay. Now I feel like I just put a big downer on the...
No, it's so interesting. Sorry that we're so quiet. We're like learning from you.
I think it's so important to actually talk about this type of a situation, though, because in my mind, I've always thought of there being, and maybe this is bad terminology, but this is the terminology that I've thought in my head. There's clean deaths and there's shameful deaths, right? And we treat people in two different categories, right? If it wasn't your fault, then we flock around you and we help you because nothing that you did put you in this position.
Right.
But if it's a shameful death, if there's shame surrounding that, then there's a little bit less compassion and love, and there's more whispering, and there's more blame, and there's, I would say, less support. And I mean, I can't speak to that personally, but I bet you can. And you did allude to the fact that when people talk to you, it's kind of like you say, oh, my husband, died of a drug addiction. And it's like, right, nobody wants to ask you about that. It's just like, okay, and we're done.
And yet, right now today, everyone listening to this knows someone who's addicted to drugs. And even if you don't want to say it in that way, because calling someone a drug addict is hard, but everyone knows someone who takes too much medicine of one type or another, or has another addiction that maybe is less insidious. But I think all humans are addicts in one way or another. It's just whether you're a legal addict or whether you're a socially acceptable addict. And one thing that has really been hurtful to me is that everyone tells about all the support they had as a widow. We were in a weird spot because we had moved 3 weeks before he died. So we were away from our home base and we were in a new place. We did have the funeral and burial in Idaho where we're from. But my family didn't get that support. Like, no one brought us a meal. No one sent anything. My kids didn't have... I don't even know what to say because there was nothing. No one here knew us. And we were gone from where we were. So it was kind of like... I used to tell people that I felt like I was in the witness protection program. Because I could go for weeks. And unless I was at work where people knew me, like no one would ever... You just didn't see anyone no one would say your name. The first time someone said my name, like at Walmart, I about jumped out of my skin because I was, whoa, someone knows me.
Okay, wait. Is your name really Laurel?
It is now.
Be honest. Is it Gloria?
My first name is actually Zelda, so you can call me that
what?
if you like.
No, it is really?
Please start using that. That's so cool.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It was so uncool when I was a little kid, and my grandma and my mother both have that name as well. But now I should totally
Your
switch.
name is Zelda Laurel?
That's amazing.
Interview's done.
Mic drop. Zelda in the house.
I know. I had a surgery one time, and the nurse came in the room. She's like, your name is Zelda Steele. That is the best superhero name I've ever heard in my life.
It's a superhero name. Oh, my God.
Hey, Zelda, I have a question for you.
You bet.
Can I just call you Zelda?
You can. I answer to it.
Oh, my gosh. How old were your kids when this happened? And how did you tell them? And how are they coping? And it's just, you've been through so much. And so have they.
So they were 20, 17, 14, and 11. And I feel like the way they coped had a lot to do with their age and how much they were aware of their dad's addiction. My oldest she and her dad are so similar that they butted heads a lot, and she has dealt with a lot of anger, and it's been hard for her to reconcile. My second child is maybe a little more of the nurturing type. He forgave his dad very quickly and just was like, I forgive you, I'm moving on. My third...
Is that the one who just had a baby?
Yes. Yes, I am a grandma now.
Congratulations, Grandma.
And he's delicious. Yes. He's just absolutely delightful. So my third child was like daddy's girl. And it's been hard because she was 14 when he died. And he really struggled the last 5 years. But, he was the kind of dad that played the fun games like, don't touch my floor. and they would laugh and carry on and try to get across the bedroom without touching the floor. And he made up silly songs and played fun games. And, you know, she was daddy's girl. And no matter what you say and what problems your parents have, there's just a lot of good that's lost. And then the youngest one, and he was only 11, and it's interesting with kids. And Anita, I know your kids are young. Mel, do you have kids? I missed that part.
Nope, just dogs.
It's like kids reprocess through grief as they get older. So what happens when you're 11 feels different when you're 14, and he's 18 now. Like, we had this day where he was like, Mom, I'm taller than Dad was now, and aren't I? And I'm like, you are, bud. And he's like, whoa. Like, he only can remember him the way 11-year-old remembers him. And we spend not a lot of time talking, but a lot of times talking a tiny bit. So just regularly, hey, oh yeah, Dad liked this song. And it doesn't evolve into big conversation, but it's still a regular part of our life.
How aware were they of his drug problems? I mean, do you think that they really understand? I mean, sometimes we assume that unless we had a huge life insurance payout, we don't really need to know anything about investments or even finances. But guess what? A little knowledge of finances is critical for all of us. Maybe your partner was in charge of that stuff, and now you find yourself making all the decisions. Maybe you're mad about that. Maybe I am. Nicole from the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast is here to help. She tackles financial literacy by telling the stories of women and widows and finance experts, and shares the lessons they've learned as certified financial planners. Whether you know a lot and feel confident in your financial decisions or feel unsure about all of that stuff, there is more to learn. Listen and subscribe to the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast on all podcast platforms. This ad was paid for by Rockhouse Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor.
They were very
Put that in, Mel.
They were very aware, but had to process at the age they were at. So
Right,
the 20-year-old and the 17-year-old
So you didn't
felt it.
You
like
couldn't
an adult.
hide that from them, right? Because it was like so in your face. It was just part of life.
Right.
Right.
And also, like I said before, I had to protect them. So they had very specific rules. Like at the
Right.
very end,
Ugh.
you cannot get in a car with your dad. Like,
Yeah.
if you need to call me, even though I'm at work. Like, I need to run interference, or the older siblings need to, or anyway, there was definitely a safety concern combined with love, which makes it hard. One super amazing thing that has happened is that my kids love each other fiercely, and they developed a bond because of things being so hard. Like, when you go through something really hard with someone, you have a history with them, and it just forges really amazing bonds. My kids are really tight, and they're like...
I hope that happens for my kids, because right now they just hate each other. And they beat each other up.
And they're polar opposites. My oldest child is lesbian, loud, and proud. My second child just graduated from BYU, went on a mission for our church, and is married and has a child. And yet they are fiercely devoted to each other and could not be more opposite. And so that's like a silver lining. And I don't even know if I like the word silver linings, but things happen that turn out being good in spite of a lot of bad things. So my kids are great. They're amazing.
I mean, as widows, we all have those lists of what to say, what not to say. And of course, like, we're going to have some common things, but what would you say to people that are not sure how to handle the death of somebody that has died from drug overdose or suicide, or something that falls into the less clean category, like Anita was saying? What would you say to do, and what would you say to not do? And I know that's like so black and white, but you know what I mean.
My short answer to that is to just do something. It's better to do the wrong thing than to do nothing. And don't wait. I mean, I know that we all laugh when because people will say, oh, what can I do to help? Don't even ask. Just do something. Like just do something, not nothing. That's what I would always say.
Yeah, we agree.
If you don't know what food to take a gift card to a pizza place.
Yes. Same answers. Yeah.
The most important thing someone did to me, honestly, though, was the easiest thing in the world. I had one friend, and we were pretty good friends, but not like best friends. But she literally sent me a text every single day for like 3 years, like every single day. And at some point, that starts to feel like a lifeline, like someone is going to think about me today. Because remember, I lived in a place where I didn't know anybody. We were new. I've got kids that are traumatized. The tiniest thing that literally probably took 5 seconds probably meant the most to me out of anything. So that's what I would say. Send a text.
I love that. That gave me goosebumps a little bit just thinking of somebody keeping you in their mind for that long. Because we've had lots of people who want to help, but then it's short-lived for the most part. So to have somebody who can hold you in their heart or in their mind for that long means a lot, even when it is something small like that. So good job, friend.
Yes. My husband's brother had lost his wife. She had cystic fibrosis. And he told me, so I had someone that I could at least relate to. We could talk about it.
Yeah.
But he told me that everyone is going to be there for like 2 weeks and maybe up to 2 months, but everyone's life goes on, which is true. So it's those people that kind of keep reaching out beyond that point that really have your heart,
So you're obviously pretty open about your story. For somebody that isn't quite sure if it's okay to ask you about your story, how would you respond? Are you open with I just met you, obviously,
right.
You told me it was okay to ask you things, but I think that, a lot of people have the fear that that's not okay to ask. They're like that anyway with us, and we didn't have a similar death where they're like, oh, I don't want to bring up Scott or Jason. I don't want to remind them, or I don't want to bring up something sad. If somebody asks you specifically about the addiction, is that okay to ask?
It's okay with me. So it actually makes me happy when people ask about my husband, because I go through life almost as if he never existed, especially now that we're 7 years out. And I'll even go to a family reunion where everyone knew him and loved him. They knew there were problems, but they really did love him. And I'll spend 4 or 5 days with him and no one will mention him, even at that. It's like, no, I would so much rather people say something. Again, we're going to go back, say something, not nothing. It's just bring him up. I don't forget. I mean, I know he's dead. So you're not going to make me sad, because I know that all day, every day, right? It's not going to make my kids sad. So I got to tell you my funny story. Okay, we talked about morbid humor. Okay, so my husband and I, we loved Halloween. Halloween was our thing. We were the family that would all dress up, even he and I. We have some great family pictures. Well, a few months after he died, we went to Costco, and there was the full-size skeleton. And my daughter was like, let's buy that, Mom. I was like, all right, because at that point, I was in the mode of buy the kids everything they want because their dad just died, right? So anyway, so we buy the skeleton, we bring it home, and we're like, set it on a chair. What should we name it? Well, let's name it Carrie, which is their dad's name. And they're like, we can put a baseball cap on it, and we could do our family picture. It's going to be awesome.
Oh my
gosh. So anyway, we decided that Carrie's mom might not like that specifically, so we didn't do it. But we kept the skeleton sitting in the chair for months and then ended up putting it away for a while. But a couple years later, my son was like, hey, Mom, can I borrow Carrie? I'm like, yeah, sure. What do you want? And he sat it in the seat of the truck next to him and is like, I'm taking my dad to school today. Just that kind of thing. So the skeleton...
Did he use the carpool lane because his dad was in the car with him? Because he could have.
He should have. But, that's just the kind of thing we do.
Okay, so if he got pulled over with the skeleton with Carrie in the passenger seat, and the police officer came up to him, he would just have to totally pull the "my dad is dead" card, and maybe he would have gotten away with it.
So I was about 2 years into widowhood before I met any other widows, and that really changed my life. I didn't know such a thing as like Facebook widow groups existed. I only found it because I one day was, I guess, desperate. I just Googled widow onto Facebook and a whole bunch of things popped up. Anyway, so like widows should know other widows. Just off the top, like that will help you probably more than any other thing. And that was really my idea with the podcast is like you can at least hear someone tell their story, even if you don't know any other widows. At least you can relate to someone talking about being a widow.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm telling you, I found it so helpful just to hear other people, and it made me feel like I wasn't crazy.
And we all feel like we are, right? And we probably all
Yes.
are, and that's okay, right? And especially like...
But in the beginning, you don't know that everybody else feels crazy until you listen to them and you realize that everybody else feels crazy. And then you're like, oh, it's not just me.
Do you ever have those moments where you look back and you're like, wow, like I was crazy, or what happened to my brain? Like I was on, I don't know. Anyway, I look back, I'm like, I don't even remember that year. What happened? How did I survive? So, anyway, so I met some other widows and we got together with all of our kids, and the kids sit around talking and we're like, who plays the dead dad card? Everybody raised their hand, every single person. So, and anyway, it's like we all have this card. Sometimes I think of it as like my ace card, right? And I use it, what's the word? Like when you don't feel guilty about it. Like I don't feel...
Unabashedly?
Yes, I used it unabashedly at times. Just because I felt like that's the hand that was dealt me. And so that's the hand I'm going to play. You know, if it helps me get a better deal on a car, it helps me get a better deal on a car, I will use that card, you know. And same with my kids. If whatever little bit of having a dead dad helps them, well, then it's still their dad helping them. So I'm going to let them use it, you know. So
I love that you guys got together and the kids were there too, because I know we talk a lot about, you know, widows getting together, but I mean, man, what a good support group for those kids to have some other people that are around their age that have gone through similar things. Like that's a weird spot to be in as a kid.
Totally. And I wish I could say that that was something that evolved into something like amazing. It has evolved into some friendships of sorts. But it was great for the kids to have something that they could relate to. Oh, I had a really good train of thought and I totally lost it.
You're a widow.
I know, right? I think I followed the vein more. I just felt this need to help other widows, which you guys obviously have that disease as well. And so I followed that along more. But I do think it's good for everyone to talk to people that have been through something similar. I think my kids also, everyone we knew was mostly a cancer death for whatever reason. And so they had that kind of weird thing too, like, well, that's not really how my dad died. So I
was going to ask that.
Yeah.
If any of your widow friends had similar circumstances or not. Because I think within the widow community, it's also helpful to find your specific circumstances also, because there's so many shared experiences with a cancer death or with a death that's, you know, like we were talking about before, that's more complicated, or like Mel and I have similar situations in that it was sudden and we didn't have any preparation for it. So I think it's, you know, the widow community is great to have, and then it's even better to find those within those smaller sub circumstances, which is another great reason why we're talking to you, because you know, people in these situations, I don't think, are usually as open and willing, because it's painful.
Yeah, it's just
to be open.
It's just complicated. I just can't find a better English word for it.
For sure. And we get people reaching out all the time, you know, that they have communities within their community, but they're like all old people. And so when they find us, they're like, oh, you know, it's people like me.
How old are you guys?
Yeah. I'm 40 now.
Whoa.
I am 38.
I know.
38. You're just babies. No, I remember
know.
feeling like so I was 46 when I was widowed, and I felt really young. And then I went to some widow things, and I was like, okay, I'm just like in the middle. I'm not even that
Yeah.
young, like I'm just in the middle. But obviously I'm not that old either, like
Yeah.
when you have an 11-year-old, that's young. The kids have lost their dad, but
What's your life like now?
it's nothing like I thought it would be. That's the quickest answer. There is nothing about my life other than my children that resembles my previous life. I live in a different state. My kids are all grown. I live in suburbia. We used to live in the country. I mean, there's just nothing that's the same. But the hardest thing, I think, for me, and now that my youngest just graduated high school, is like, okay, so I foresee a big, long stretch of loneliness ahead. I feel like the first 2 years, people would be like, oh, you're going to date. And then, like, I've tried the dating apps. For people my age, it's like a void wasteland of opportunities in the dating world, because most people my age are really looking to date someone your age. And that's just how it is.
We're sorry.
No, I hope you find someone good, but do you really want them if they're 15 years older than you?
No, I don't want any of them.
0. That's why we're widow wives together.
Yeah. So I guess I have a hippie vibe, and I've got, do you guys follow like van life stuff at all? I have a Sprinter camper conversion.
I love that. Yes.
I had a feeling this was going to appeal to you for some reason. So yeah. So I actually have a Volkswagen bus and also a Sprinter conversion.
What?
So
You're, oh my, I can't even talk right now because I'm so excited. You're like, this is my dream. Please tell me everything.
So I guess it started out almost as a joke. I would tell my children, when you're out of the house, I'm just going to come park in your driveway and in my RV and spend 1 month at a time with each of you. And now I literally can do that. So now they just all got to get out of my house and do their own thing. That's the only problem I have left. But
I need a driveway.
I have like a driveway with like 4 spots. So
The VW bus and the Sprinter van are like my 2 dream van life things. So you're my hero.
So then we should really go. See, you like didn't know that you really wanted to meet me in person. I tried to talk Anita into this. And she was like, no, we only record remote. I'm like, no, it's a lot more fun in person. I promise
it's
you.
my
Mel's fault, not
It's
mine.
because it makes it so much easier on me because the audio's isolated.
Right, I get that. The hippie part of me has, well, what I guess I would say is that being a widow and all the life things I've gone to have made it now so I don't really care about things. I care a lot about experiences. And I am that person that could live in a van by the river. So, except I need a shower.
Down by the river.
So,
And you don't even need a bathroom. You can just get a bucket, the Home Depot buckets with like the thing.
I know, right?
Yeah.
No, Anita's laughing, but this is the truth.
Anita.
Like, you can do so much stuff. I made a shower out of a weed sprayer.
Yeah.
So,
Anita, you touch people's gross feet. This bucket cannot gross
but
you
I don't
out.
pee in a bucket.
why don't you have a weed sprayer shower for after your races and stuff?
Yeah, maybe you.
Well, I would be for that. I just draw the limit at peeing in a
No, listen.
bucket.
At Home Depot, you can get these like bags you put in them, and then they help like dissolve and
Oh,
treat
okay.
the products.
And you can have a toilet
The
seat on top of the
product.
bucket, so you feel like you're on a seat.
yeah.
Okay, I'm more open to this, but still need some
you had-
convincing.
Okay, so when we all get together and hang out, I'm going to bring the Sprinter, and I'll show you how it works.
What we need to do.
Just bring the bucket.
What we need to do is now we need to do another little
Go camping.
trip, like a one-nighter thing, Anita, and you need to find an orphanage for your kids, and then I'll bring Janet.
I know.
An
And
orphanage.
Miss Zelda Laurel can bring
She's
whoever.
always encouraging me to send my
Janet?
kids to the orphanage.
Janet is my trailer.
That's right. Okay.
So Zelda Laurel,
Yes.
lady. So before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about COVID and the world collectively grieving.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
So when this whole thing's been going on, but especially early on when we're like needing to quarantine, kids suddenly didn't go to school. So life was just like completely different for everybody. And everyone was grieving something, whether they couldn't see their grandkid or they couldn't graduate or they just had to change their vacation. Like no matter what it was, it felt like everyone in the whole world was grieving something and heading into this big unknown. And it just made me feel a sense of what widowhood felt like. And I just developed this huge compassion because I already know what a lot of grief feels like. But to have everyone go through the same thing at the same time felt really, I don't know if powerful is the right word, but it just felt maybe overwhelming, like feeling how everyone is walking into the unknown.
Because now every single person on the planet will know what it's like to have something as big as that.
Right. And I don't want to compare, and that's one thing else I've learned through all of this, is not to compare grief. Like your grief is different than mine. My grief is different than my child's. My grief is different than someone that couldn't have the wedding they wanted because of COVID. But it's all still significant, right? Like it really matters. And the biggest thing is just like empathy. And that's what is such a problem with COVID is people are on different sides of the coin of a mask or not a mask or this or that. And I just want people to be like, I even wore my shirt today. It just says be kind. And like, just put yourself in someone else's shoes no matter what, because it's hard. Like all loss is hard. All grief is hard.
Everybody's going through something. And even if you haven't gone through it, it still is hard for them.
But don't you guys think that like going through losing your spouse has given you empathy to a whole bunch of other stuff?
Yes, but I've also noticed that it's hardened me to other things as well. And so I have to keep my empathy in check for things that I don't think are as massively explosive as my husband dying. So
right.
a good...
You're like, I've got the ace card.
Yeah, I'm like...
I've trumped you all.
It's true. Well, and actually when the pandemic happened and people were like, oh no, are we going to be out of work for 2 weeks? I was like, oh, that's like going to be no big deal. Like I've been preparing for this like for so long just because having the unknowns of being a widow and like losing things immediately, it's just like, oh, for me personally, the effects of the world shutting down in a way have not been that phasing to me because I'm still healing and in recovery and all this stuff. But for some people where it's like the worst thing that could happen is they're not working for like 1 or 2 weeks, and of course now months. I'm just like, it's going to be fine. It gives us like longer perspective, but also at the same time, like, because I have been through so much and it's been hard. Now I'm kind of like, now you guys know what something hard is like.
Right.
Even though this is nothing as devastating, but it's like, you're still waking up and you still have your person next to you maybe.
Yeah.
So you can work, you can make it through not having a job. But at the same time, I have to remember that it's all relative to people's experiences and perspective at that time. And so it could be the most devastating thing that's happened to them. And I was really thinking like, okay, the whole world is going through the same pandemic. It has not left anybody unscathed in one way or another. And so I just hope that brings more empathy, even though things are kind of crazy right now too, like you said, like everything's really politicized, like the masks and the no masks and the race riots and all these things. It's just like, man, we've all gone through hard things. People are having a hard time. Let's just be kind. I agree.
It's like we're kind of like 4 months into this, and it's 4 months into grief. And people are freaked out. And you guys, and like I've lived already through that. So that's why it has this familiar feel. And also has the feel of like, yeah, we got this. It's fine. We know we can survive. And I think that's one thing my experience as a whole taught me was like I literally lost my house, all of my money, my husband, had to move to a different state. And yeah, it was so devastating, like beyond comprehension devastating. And yet, in a weird way, I learned I could survive, and that made it somehow liberating. So like, you know that you can make it. You know that like there's going to be a better day. Might not be today, but that's how I feel about COVID is like, I feel you. Like, I feel that this is hard and it hurts, but we're all going to be okay. Except for the dead people.
Yeah.
And, like.
Yeah. But it's teaching everybody how to pace themselves and play the long game instead of just sprint. Like grief does for us.
But at the end, like, there's only one way you get out of life, and that's to die. I mean, I'm not going to diminish death, but it is a thing. Like, people are going to die, and every day someone's going to die anyway. Every day we have new widows made or widowers made, or someone loses a kid, and every day it's like a huge deal. But yet every day that's reality, right? Like, you can't pretend like it's not going to happen. But then you have friends that have your back. You have people that you find, if you don't have friends already, that are going to have your back. And then you meet people that like vans and want to camp, and, like, and they speak your language, like, and then you're like, okay, there's hope in the world because other people don't mind pooping in a bucket either.
And Anita will soon be one of those people.
Anita, bucket pooper. That's what I want.
All that I have to say is if you got to go, a bucket is sometimes your savior.
Okay.
Right? Like,
well, just remember that I do a lot of trail running too, and so like I'm not above
so you
a
just
lot of things.
prefer not a bucket,
So
just nature.
I just prefer to get home.
I
first.
would think that the bucket would be like a step up from going in the woods, Anita.
I think I'm not disagreeing.
Oh my gosh.
This is awesome. You guys are great. Thank you for like having me, and
Yeah, we really
all good.
appreciate you being our guest, and it's so great to meet you.
yes, so much. We have a lot of things in common.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I wish it was prettier, but that's life, right?
And I think we all need to hear more
I do
of
too.
the unpretty, It's real.
It's just really real.
It's not like people are taking drugs because they're feeling awesome. Like, people are hurting, right? And people are sad and they want to fill a void. It's like you hear of people dying from drug overdoses or becoming addicts or taking their life, and it's like they're usually like very kind people that are very like sensitive to others and awesome people, and it's a hard world.
Well,
so it's not something
like,
they shouldn't be put in a terrible box,
It's like exactly what you just said. We're not talking about an addict. We're talking about an amazing person who had so many emotions that they couldn't cope. So they're using something to try to cope. They're not an addict. They're a person that feels a lot.
Yeah. Feels a whole lot more
Yeah.
than a lot of people can.
Laurel, thank you for being a guest on a podcast and letting us turn the tables on you. I am sorry that your story is kind of sucky. Not kind of sucky. Super,
sucky.
super sucky. But I really appreciate you sharing it and being open about it, because I think we tend to hide things like that and not be as open with it because it is more complicated. So I really think that you are going to... your story is going to connect with somebody out there, and they're going to feel the same feelings that we have felt when we hear other people who have similar stories. They're going to feel that about your story. And so thank you for being willing to share it. We hope you guys have found it helpful to listen to.
Can I say something?
No.
If anyone wants to talk about it,
Yeah, go ahead.
if they have an addict in their life or something and they want to shoot me a message, if you'll put some info in the show notes, and they could reach out to me and I will respond.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
So thanks, you guys.
Remember to check out the Widow Wives Club if you're a widow, and a Facebook page if you're just a grief civilian and want to know more. And also rate and review the podcast so we can find and reach out to more people. And by the way, if you are looking for more widow and widower stories to normalize your grief process, you can always check out Laurel's podcast, Widowland Life. It's available on iTunes and all the places you find our podcast. So check it out. It's never a bad thing to have more rather than less widow stories out there. I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Laurel, but you can also call me Zelda.
Zelda!
Zelda! We're just three widows trying to figure out Widow.
Widow.
We do now.
Widow we
Now.
do now.
This is my favorite thing to discuss with you.
Tell me, what is it?
One of my favorite things. I do enjoy tacos and cheese and dogs. This is about how you cannot pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a phone plan, especially when you're a widow, your person is dead, you might have kids, you might need another option, and you just want your phone to work, you want unlimited texting and service, and you want it to be like $25 a month.
It blows my mind that they have plans that start at $15 a month. That is so cheap. And the cool thing is it uses other 5G networks, and so you don't have to pay extra for that, and you still get great service.
Yep, Anita and I have traveled all over, and I have used my phone. So I highly recommend it. And my mom's even on it. When my dad died, we put his phone down to the cheapest plan, which is $15 a month. And I think my mom's on the $20 a month plan, and it's so worth it. It's so much cheaper than what we were all paying before. So I highly recommend it if you're on a budget or not. Who cares? Ryan Reynolds is in charge of the company, and they send you free stickers with Ryan Reynolds temporary tattoos. It's kind of the best. So if somebody wants to sign up, what can they do, Anita?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. Seriously, you guys. Such a great idea. Save yourself some money.
And if you're worried about losing data or having any changes with your phone, not going to happen. They walk you through it. Everything's fine. It's the easiest process of all time. Again, that's
trymintmobile.com/WWDN.